1. I live in Ireland, the northern part to be exact, and I've always had an interest in the paranormal. However, I can't say I've had a huge number of experiences that amount to anything. I do have a few personal stories and local legends that I would like to share, however, so I'm going to start with one that's been quite prominent recently. I live in the outskirts or suburbs of Belfast, Northern Ireland's capital, and not too far away from me is a 7-mile cycle trail, which has been promoted as a safe, eco-friendly travel route for cyclists through the urban areas of the city outskirts. Much of the cycle path is bordered by steep banks, which are lush with trees and vegetation. The reason for this is that the path used to be a railway line that ceased operation in the 50s or 60s, but more on that later. Anyway, at this point, you might be wondering what's so spooky about an innocent cycle path. It took me a long time to learn about what goes on under the surface on this area, and it was only once I began to use it as a quick route to my friends' houses that I began to discover the activity under the surface. For a start, the area is hugely popular with drug dealers, with shoes tied to branches indicating the location for pickups or trading. On top of this, a huge amount of muggings also take place here. Just under a month ago, it was reported that a man had been attacked by a gang with baseball bats and brass knuckles under the cover of darkness, of course. These events become more prominent in the stretch of path closer to the city center. Along another stretch of the path, a young man took his own life several years ago, and a small plaque tucked into the bushes acts as a painful reminder. Now, earlier I mentioned that the path was once an old railway line, and several of the old platforms are still partially intact. Recently, however, many people have reported hearing the sound of train whistles and other rattling sounds. They are always reported as being very faint and sounding as though they are officially in the distance. It is reported that you are most likely to hear them in a quiet night. However, I myself haven't heard anything thus far. A few years ago, a video surfaced on YouTube that was from the headcam of a cyclist. He stopped along a stretch of the path and examined what he describes as a straw effigy, a figure made from straw and plastic for clothing. Apparently several of these appeared along the greenway strung to trees by their necks. These dolls immediately sprung rumors of some sort of witchcraft, and pictures made it onto several local forums. Now, the most likely explanation is that they were placed as a sort of practical joke. However, it was a creepy occurrence nonetheless. Up until now, I took most of this stuff for granted. While I knew that the pathway had a dark side, I didn't really buy into anything paranormal. However, I've been reconsidering this because of something that happened just a few nights ago. I was cycling a short stretch homeward after visiting a friend, when I approached an area where a 5-meter deep ditch begins on each side of the path. Large, low-lying trees make visibility poor, and leave a dark, abyssal crevice, which you can barely see into below the leaves. As I was cycling through this area, I took a glance to my left, and sitting on top of the deep ditch I saw some sort of skinny, hairless humanoid, with deepest possibly black eyes, and long dark hair resting with its head on a trunk. The sighting was only a split second, as I turned back to face the path, and floored it all the way home. Since the sighting was so quick, I wondered whether my brain had created something out of the leaves and thick tree trunks. All the same, it seemed so vivid. Just yesterday, I was taking a jog up the path much earlier in the day, and I tried to pinpoint the spot where I had seen this creature. With little struggle I did find it, and my first shock was that this area of the crevice had no tree trunks or branches. It was an empty gap leading to the ditch below. I knew that this is where I had seen the thing, but I now don't know what to think. On top of this, the gap was about 8 or 9 feet wide, and from what I remember, this creature took up the whole length of it. With this happening so recently, and along with the fact that I haven't had another paranormal experience in so long, I am now slightly on edge. I'd love to hear if anyone has seen anything similar, and I will probably provide updates if anything else strange occurs here, since I visit the area so often. So has my imagination gone wild, or do you think there is something really going on here? 2. When I was little, I always felt like I was being watched by something in our house, and it creeped me the fuck out. Perhaps the scariest moment was when I was so frightened by the thought of being watched in the middle of the night. I tried to run into my parents' room and the door was locked, and I couldn't sleep with them, when all of a sudden I swear I heard a voice yell my name. I ended up sleeping in my older brother's room. He told me I was just imagining stuff, but I didn't give a shit. Also, keep in mind, I didn't really watch any horror films or read any scary stories at this age, so nothing could have inspired me to gain these thoughts. I was too sensitive to get into that type of stuff. This scared me so much, I couldn't sleep alone until I was like 11, and I refused to go anywhere in the house unless someone was nearby. That being said, when my dad got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, I opened my eyes to make sure he wouldn't leave me. I was that paranoid. And it was right then when I saw 3 shadow figures follow my dad into the bathroom. And then when he walked out, they walked out with him, and then entered the hallway. I told my dad what I saw, but I don't remember him saying much. He was probably too tired to care. I freaked out about it in the morning, and told my mom and then my brothers and sister, who also started freaking out, and we moved a year later. My parents are very religious, so they jumped to conclusions that it was demons, and I do indeed remember being terrified when all of this happened. I know Scare Theatre explained that a lot of people who have encountered shadow people are usually not even scared by them. They have a calming presence, and some will even have conversations with people in the house. But personally, I just remember being disturbed. I'm actually not very religious like the rest of my family, so I don't know if these things were good or bad, but nothing bad ever really happened in the house. It just used to constantly creep me out with the idea of being watched while I was sleeping. One of my girlfriends at the time actually told me a similar experience. According to her, when she was about 8 years old, same age when I saw this too, while she was setting everything up in her new house, she saw a shadow person in her room. This made her believe that the house was haunted, and she's been having nightmares for decades. Her family also went through a lot of major struggles, such as financial issues, family members dying, friendship losses, etc. She had a rough childhood. I asked her about it, and she told me that she believed some type of Indian burial ground or something was buried beneath the surface of the house. The creepy thing is that I found out we apparently used to live in the same neighborhood. Originally, this was all I was going to post, and would have posted it yesterday, but I got interrupted by a family trip. And I was a little skeptical posting information about my ex, but I had a nightmare last night, that an assassin was in our apartment, and I knew I was dreaming. So I kept trying to open my eyes, but for some reason I couldn't. So I tried moving my right hand up against my body and tried lifting my left hand up, but I couldn't. So I just tried squeezing against the side of my bed. Suddenly, I thought I woke up, and I saw something dark moving towards me, and it gave me a hug. I assumed it was my dad trying to comfort me after hearing me struggle. My room is almost pitch black at night, so I can't tell who exactly it was. But then when I actually did wake up, and I was breathing heavily like I had just had sleep paralysis, and my hands were in the exact position of how they were in my dream. But the shadow person wasn't there anymore. Those people were right, it just popped out of nowhere, directly grabbing onto me. And yet it didn't have an uncomfortable presence. I can't really describe it. I mean, it could be likely that I wasn't scared because I thought it was my dad. But the thing was right in front of me. I woke up not scared. These aren't the first times I've dealt with supernatural things, but rather curious, and then went back to sleep. I told my mom about this dream, and she still thinks that it's a demon trying to trick me. She even told me when I had sleep paralysis for the first time, that most Christians believe that it's something trying to scare you, and that God is telling you that you need to pray about a stressful situation going on in your life, so He can help you. She even told me that she's had it happen several times. Yeah. I really didn't believe that either, because I later kind of got used to sleep paralysis, and now it's not that big of a deal. It is indeed frightening, and to be quite honest, even though I felt comfortable again, I still don't quite know if these shadow things are actually good. And I know it sounds like my mom isn't very comforting, but I understood that she was just telling her beliefs, and she wasn't doing it in a rude way. I've had tons of times when my mom has emotionally supported me when I was in a depressing situation. I just want to know what everyone else here thinks. Edit. I just randomly remembered this. One time at the house where I saw the shadow people, me and my sister were playing with toys in my room, and then she told me to hide with her in the closet. She apparently saw someone, and we wouldn't get out for hours because she was so scared of seeing it again. 3. My family moved into a small house in northeast Ohio when I was about 5 years old. I had a bedroom on the first floor for a few years, and everything went fine. The entire upstairs attic was my parents' bedroom, since it was just one giant room. When I was about 12, I switched rooms with them so I could have the big room. The attic always gave me a strange feeling, but nothing horribly off-putting. Sometimes I would be sitting at my desk alone and I would manage to spook myself out with what I thought was just my wild imagination. I never felt completely alone for some reason. A few months after staying in the attic, a young boy started to appear in my dreams, probably about 6 years old. He was almost blue in color, had short, dark hair, and he wore little shorts and a button-down shirt, almost like a 1960s type school uniform. He always had a neutral expression on his face. He never spoke to me in my dreams. He was just there. He would occasionally point to things or just stare at me. I never once felt like he was evil or malicious. I think he just wanted to be seen by me. I would always wake up feeling like I was being watched after seeing him in my dreams. One night I had a dream that he was standing by my bed staring at me, and when I woke up, I felt an overwhelming presence close to my bed. I felt sick, like something was horribly wrong, but I still didn't feel like the boy was evil. Just sad and lonely, maybe. Like maybe he was having nightmares and wanted to be by me. I started to recognize his presence whenever I would feel like I wasn't alone in my room. Fast forward to when I was 16. I hadn't seen the boy in my dreams for quite some time, until my grandmother passed away. I fell asleep the night before her wake and saw the boy in my dream. I was in a field, and he was standing at the top of a hill with his back turned toward me. Keep in mind, I've been dreaming about him for about 4 years, and he has never spoken to me before. He turns around and looks at me, and in a low, soft voice he says, "You know, her feet are cold." Then I woke up. I felt strange because he literally has never spoken to me before, but he then randomly tells me that someone's feet are cold. Okay. So I went to my grandma's open casket wake that day, and my mom started to throw a fit because, along with my grandma's favorite belongings that were placed on her body in the casket, there was a pair of her favorite slippers on top. My mom wanted the slippers put on my grandma's feet because her feet were always cold when she was alive. She wanted to make sure my grandma's feet would be warm in the afterlife. I had no idea that my mom even asked for the funeral home to put the slippers on her. I realized that the boy who often visited me in my dreams was letting me know that my grandma's feet were cold, although I still saw him in my dreams and felt his presence. He never spoke to me again after this. I always felt a special appreciation for him. I felt more connected and at ease when he appeared in my dreams or when I felt his presence. He was like a guardian of some sort. I grew to love him. I don't live with my parents anymore, and ever since I moved out, he stopped appearing in my dreams. I miss him every now and then, and I'll go into my old bedroom and sit on the floor just so he can see me, so he knows that I'm okay, and I still think about him. This was a real experience of mine, and I've been wanting to share it with people for years. Maybe I'm crazy, but I know what I felt. 4. Okay, so when I was little, maybe 6, my oldest sister, 8 at this time, would wake up screaming a lot in the middle of the night. This continued until she was in high school. No one really told me the details, just that she was having night terrors, so I never thought much of it. Well, when I was about 18, I took my sister's old room when she moved out. It was a big room, so I was excited. Nothing major really happened to me, until a few months afterward I had my nieces stay over. That night I woke up around probably 3 to 4 a.m. My nieces were sleeping on my floor. We made up a bed for them. I can't explain the feeling I had or why I didn't freak out, but there was just some dude leaning against my dresser watching my nieces. I laid there watching him until I fell back asleep. He looked very old-timey, but maybe in his 20s. I didn't feel scared when I saw him. When I woke up the next day, I was pretty confused. I'm positive I saw him. I remember exactly what he looked like, everything. I mentioned this to my sister and she began to describe the man detail for detail. Apparently growing up, she would wake up and see this guy at the foot of her bed just watching her. That's why she'd wake up screaming. So that's pretty eerie. We decided not to mention it to my parents because my father's a pastor, and they usually don't listen to me about that stuff. They just tell me to pray it away, and being a kid, I was less than amused by that response. Well, about 2 weeks after this incident, I was woken up to the sound of my dad downstairs praying at like 4 or 5 a.m. He usually prays in his room, but for some reason he was pacing the whole downstairs, praying really loud. When I woke up the next day, I asked him what it was all about, and he told me that he was watching TV. He worked thirds as well at this time. He said he saw some guy looking at him from the stairs. He said he just sat and watched this guy very calmly walk down the stairs past the living room, and he like evaporated into the kitchen. My dad said from there he jumped up and just started praying, blessing the house. I asked my dad what the man looked like, and he described the same man my sister and I saw. A few nights later, shit got real. I had a friend over, and my oldest sister was upstairs with us as well. So it was me, my friend, my mom, and sister. At around 4ish, we got woken up by what I can only describe as something absolutely destroying our kitchen. We could hear plates smashing, things breaking. It even sounded like they turned over our fridge. It was really scary. The scariest part was that we could hear our dog just screaming and whining like crazy. After a while, we thought it was a wild animal or something, so we called my sister's boyfriend to come over and kill it. He had guns, so I guess that was our line of thinking, I don't know. This is the weird part. Though we're still hearing our kitchen get just ruined and what sounds like our dog just dying. Well, when Kyle got there, he said it sounded like the house was being destroyed. Him and his friend grabbed their guns, rushed to the door, and the second he unlocked the door, silence. There was no noise, no smashing, nothing. Everything just stopped the second we heard the door open. We waited a few minutes until he came upstairs to get us, and at first he was pissed. He thought we were pulling some shit on him. When we went downstairs, everything was fine. No plates were smashed, nothing was out of place. But our dog? She was in the corner crying and pissing herself. She wouldn't get out of the corner for a long-ass time. She was terrified. And we were hella confused. To this day, we can't explain it. And nothing has happened ever since. So yeah, that was my weird paranormal story. I think about that man a lot, and sometimes I wake up feeling watched. But nothing's happened since. Sometimes a light will be on when I know I just turned it off, little things like that. Has anything like that happened to anyone else? I felt no fear when I was watching him. I didn't feel anything. Does that mean something? Maybe it's somehow not dangerous, I don't know. I think about it constantly and just wish I had answers. My house isn't even that old, I don't think. 5. When I was a teen, we lived in a large home that we rented for a few years. The first summer in the home, we experienced a lot of unexplained things. Not evil or very scary, but more like pranks. When we moved in, my parents noticed a kid's camping chair that was set up in the garage, next to some plastic storage bins. The landlord asked us to not touch the chair or bins, just leave them as is. My parents really didn't think much of it, and agreed as there was plenty of space in the garage anyways. I don't remember anything odd happening during the first few months living there, until the summer came around. At the beginning of summer, my grand aunt, who was staying with us, decided to tidy up around the garage, and noticed the camping chair. Thinking it was ours, she just folded it and put it in the corner. This is when things started happening. During the course of the summer, my sisters, cousins, and I all talked about the events and decided that it was a ghost haunting us. While joking around talking about it, we decided to name the ghost Wilbert. This is a list of items that happened that summer in no particular order. My room was right over the garage, so more things happened there than the rest of the house. I had a lot of posters on my walls as a typical teenager, but there was a particular poster that would never stay up. Every day I would go back to my room to sleep, the poster would be on the floor. I tried all kinds of adhesives except for nailing it to the walls, but no matter what, it would be on the floor just a few hours later. No other poster on the wall ever fell down. My room had a walk-in closet where the light switch was on the outside of it. I used to keep a large jar of change at the top shelf of the closet, and it was pretty full. My sister and cousin one day decided to raid the jar for some change, and both went inside to bring down the jar as it was pretty heavy. But when they were in the closet, the light suddenly turned off. They freaked and ran out of there. When they saw me later, they confessed what they were doing, and told me what happened. I checked the switch. and it wasn't broken or anything. It had just been turned off. The master bedroom was across a small hallway from my room, and from my parents' bed you could see the stairs and the hallway into my room. My mom was in bed once and swears she saw me going up the stairs and into my room. An hour or so later, she went down to the kitchen and saw me in the living room watching TV. She was very confused as she would have seen me go back down, and asked if I had gone up to my room at all that evening. I had been sitting watching movies for a few hours at that point, and had not really moved from the couch since the morning. My sister had a birthday party and had some friends over. One of them had brought a new camera to take pictures, and lost it during the course of the party. We checked with all the guests and turned our living room upside down looking for this camera, but it was nowhere to be found. A few weeks later, my uncle was sitting in the living room with the rest of us, and saw something drop from the ceiling in the corner of his eye. He looked to the side chair and saw a camera. He mentioned this to my dad, and it turned out that it was the little girl's camera. The same uncle who was visiting for a few months, and stayed with us while he worked in the same town for a contract job. During his first few weeks, he noticed one of his favorite shirts was missing. He was bummed about it, and we all kept our eyes open in case we saw it mixed with our laundry. Eventually, he just considered it lost and forgot about it. When he was going back home, he was sitting at the airport waiting for his plane, and decided to get something out of his carry-on. When he opened it, he saw the shirt right on top. My cousin used to sleep over all the time, and at one of those times, as she was packing her things to go home, she could not find her phone. It was pretty new, and her dad would kill her if she had lost or broken it. So she was pretty panicked and asked us to help. We looked through my sister's room, and I even moved the beds to check under them. We then went to look around the rest of the house. After looking around with no success, my cousin went back to my sister's room and was freaking out even more. She finally started cursing out Wilbert, and yelling at him to stop playing and give back her phone. Right then we heard something hit the floor under the bed. She bent down, and saw her phone in the middle of the floor under the bed. She promptly picked it up, and apologized to Wilbert for yelling at him. There are many other stories, but this is all I can remember for now. Eventually my dad was in the garage one day and noticed the chair folded up. He remembered what the landlord had said, and after all the events had happened, decided to just set up the chair as it was before. After that, no more pranks happened at the house. The next time the landlord came over for a walkthrough, my parents asked her about the chair, and if she knew why it was there. She mentioned that it had been left there by the previous owners of the house, who gave her the same warning when they sold her the house. She never lived in the house as she just rented it out, but was very superstitious, so didn't move the chair, and always warned her tenants about it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 97. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, time for the next installment of Hellfreezer's biking adventures. Yesterday, all my troubles seemed so far away. Okay. Yesterday, I was out doing some grocery shopping, as I'm wont to do, and I was cycling home. I'd been a good boy. I'd got off the bike a couple of times for bloody pedestrians getting in my way, so I could let them pass. And when I'm on foot, it's a matter of bloody cyclists. No respect for anybody. Anyway, so I'd done that. Then I'd got back on my bike. Bear in mind, I've got a backpack filled with groceries. I've got 2 bags on the handlebars, kind of balance me out nice. So, and I'm almost home. I'm maybe just a few minutes away from home. And suddenly I hear, and the seat falls off the bike. Turns out the screw that was holding it on, for whatever reason, it must have been a cheap piece of crap, had broken. So I managed to stop the bike without falling off or hurting myself too much. I was a bit achy for the rest of the day, but didn't hurt myself too much. However, the groceries in the process that were in my backpack went flying. Needless to say, I was not a happy bunny. So I've went online. I thought I'd have to order a whole new seat, or at very least a whole new post. I found some place that was selling just a little bracket with the screw for it, so I'll try that first, see if that fixes it, because that changes a £3 repair into like 10, 20, £30 repair, depending on what I need to get for it. Anyway, so we'll see what happens. And with that, I'll head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.